Germans? No, they're the Cardinals. Anyway, they are playing 16th ranked Virginia Tech, no less. It's on cable TV if you care to watch it while listening to 1420 NBC Sports Radio Tri-Cities. And the name of this program, Tri-Cities Sports Now, I'm Marky Bilson. Going to have on a bracketologist to talk a little bit more about ETSU and really mid-major sports in general. That's in the next hour. I'll tell you more about him as we go on. Another thing that we are going to be talking to is Scott Carter, the athletic director at ETSU, who has to be very happy that the women's basketball team at ETSU took a 19-0 lead at Radford before finishing up the first quarter up 24-2 or was it 22-4? They were up 19-0 before the Highlanders got a basket up there in Radford, Virginia. It's a game that you know why those two teams play. I'm not saying it's a bad matchup for ETSU. Sometimes I'd like to see them play more often. The only thing is, I think ETSU has just dwarfed the Highlanders in prestige. And, you think about that because ETSU, the football program known so much for losing over the years. Radford doesn't have a football program, but Radford is really lost in the mix there in the Big South. I once covered a game there, and they were played in their old gym. It sat 500 people. There were no media room. The broadcasters had to broadcast from the stands. Now, they're not there anymore. But, yeah, that's one of the things about Radford is that they're just, you say that ought to be a game that they ought to play more often. Well, yeah, theoretically, but Radford's got to be a little bit more competitive. But anyway, Scott Carter will have on at 1:45 today, and that will be broadcast on Facebook on 1420 NBC Sports Radio Tri-Cities. He will be talking about ETSU's chances of hosting a home game in the FCS playoffs. And then, of course, we'll have a bracketologist also from, and I'll tell you more about him as the show goes on. Yeah, the bracketologists all seem to run together, don't they? A little bit. Yeah, I guess so. But there you are. It's now 28-24 Virginia Tech over Ball State. We'll give you that ETSU score when it comes to it and all this. But I guess, football. I'll tell you what, I'm surprised with how well both ETSU and Tennessee have done this year. I'm surprised. I thought both these teams would have losing records. That still may happen for Tennessee, but you got people now talking about Jeremy Pruitt in Knoxville and Randy Sanders in Johnson City as Coach of the Year in their respective conferences. And is that justified? What are their chances of winning it? That's what I, Marky Bilson, your voice of choice for a new generation of Tri-City sports fans, is going to talk about here in this opening monologue. And, after the Vols defeated Kentucky last Saturday, really didn't have, Kentucky's offense is just bad. I came into the year down on Jared Guarantano. He's better than what Kentucky has. I still think there's this belief to sort of, keep, he's a game manager. I'm not against game managers. I just, you had Shaw over at Stanford talking about, I think Keller Crisp can play in the pros, just a matter of numbers over at Stanford. Stanford knows a little bit more about quarterbacks than Tennessee does. What about Peyton Manning? That's one. Then who you got? Bobby Scott? Thank you. Anyway, what we have here is, I do wonder about grad transfers going to Tennessee, that sort of thing, in the future. And that's what I look at more than recruiting rankings, which are, just so flawed. And, 2004, Tennessee Volunteers' 5th best recruiting class in the country, according to Rivals. Really? Huh? That's like Florida State being preseason number 3 a year ago. Oh, this is the first year since 1981 that Florida State is likely going to miss a bowl game. they're 4-6. Yeah, they're not probably going 4-8. But yeah, Tennessee beat Kentucky. People did not see that coming. Or if they did, they didn't see a 17-point victory. And so people started saying, Mark Stoops, he was the front runner for Coach of the Year in the SEC. What about Jeremy Pruitt? Well, here's the thing. You can tell me all about the head-to-head game, but then, I don't know, does that make Will Muschamp, if the Gamecocks go 7-5, should he be selected over Jeremy Pruitt if both teams go 7-5? Now think about that for a second. Okay, Kentucky going 9-3. Kentucky ending their long losing streak to Florida. Kentucky being a basketball school and going 9-3. I mean, George Blanda is not the quarterback anymore. Tim Couch couldn't even do that. So, here we are. Stoops probably still the front runner because, Kentucky has a couple of winnable games here on out. They play a cupcake this week, and then they finish up with Louisville, who's going out of business. By the way, some people are now talking about Charlie Strong returning to Louisville. There you go. Jeff Brom can't come in. That would be, I could see that. And Louisville isn't going to be able to bring in a high-profile coach for a lot of reasons. One of them a $14 million buyout to outgoing, low-life Bobby Petrino. But okay. What if the Vols win their last two? Well, Kentucky's probably going to win their last two. So do you take 7-5 ahead of 9-3? And if you do, what would it mean for 7-5 in Knoxville gets Coach of the Year instead of 9-3 in Knoxville? I mean, the message would be it is a greater accomplishment to go 7-5 in Knoxville than it is 9-3 in Lexington. Now, I think Tennessee has lost some prestige as a college football program since the 90s. Who doesn't? I don't think they've lost that much. What would it mean to Tennessee fans who want desperately to believe, against all proof to the contrary, but they want desperately to believe that their program is on a par with the University of Florida, despite losing every game that they play to them. Now, what would it mean if 7-5 in Knoxville is considered a greater accomplishment by the people who vote on SEC Coach of the Year than, say, 9-3 in Florida, which is what likely the Florida Gators are going to finish? Now, think about that for a second. Because Dan Mullen came in, and Florida was a sinking ship. I mean, Jim McElwain. People want to knock on Butch Jones. And I want to knock on Butch Jones. Playing Brett Kendrick with a concussion, get him off. Why did we wait at Tennessee a week? Why did Tennessee wait? Let's use proper grammar. A week to fire him after that. What in the world? Some wonder why Butch Jones wasn't fired after he failed to count to 14 against Florida. But that's another story for another day. But no, Jim McElwain might have been an even worse coach than Butch Jones. They got pretty high standards in the SEC when you think about it, because both Butch Jones and Jim McElwain won at Cincinnati and Colorado State, respectively. That's how they got their respective jobs. But nevertheless, you've got a point here where the point is here, if you're looking at Coach of the Year, and here's what I'm trying to get to, Jeremy Pruitt 7-5. What would it mean? What does it say about Tennessee if he gets Coach of the Year over a Florida coach, Dan Mullen, who goes 9-3, over a Kentucky coach that goes 9-3? What would that mean? Because those are probably the records Florida and Kentucky are going to wind up with. And by the way, it's really up in the air that Tennessee finishes 7-5. Lots and lots. It seems like the chic pick now is to give up the 6 points and take Missouri and Drew Lock for whatever reason. Now, other guys I mentioned, Ed Orgeron, because, he was going to get fired. He's 8-2. What if LSU goes 10-2? Okay, they lost to Florida, sure. But if you go 10-2, when a coach is on the hot seat and supposed to be fired, and Florida only goes 9-3, well, then, Orgeron's got a shot at this thing. And it's likely going to come down to if, in the season finale, LSU can beat Texas A&M. That's the question right there. By the way, it bothers me because I see Texas A&M. I still believe in the old rivalries, even with the differences in conference. I still want LSU to finish up against Tulane. I know Tulane isn't very good historically, but I know Tulane. Well, if Tulane wanted to finish up with LSU, they shouldn't have left the SEC 50 odd years ago. Well, you got a point there, but still, I do kind of want Tulane LSU to play. It's just right, Same thing, Texas A&M. I mentioned earlier this week, Texas and Georgia signed a 2-year deal, 2028 and 2029 for those who like to plan ahead for a home-and-home series. Sounds great. Why isn't that Texas A&M playing on Thanksgiving like they should? I mean, since A&M is now in the SEC, kind of makes you wonder. First of all, if they're doing that, then the idea of Texas going to the SEC sometime in the middle of the next decade, along with Oklahoma, that kind of is like, maybe not, I guess you can always dissolve those contracts, but, why would you sign such a series if you were really contemplating going into the SEC? That's one question. Number two, cover your backs, maybe. I'm really rambling, aren't I? But number two, why isn't it Texas A&M if you want to play somebody from the SEC? Come on. It's not Texas, Georgia. I remember the Cotton Bowl in January 1st, 1984. I remember it. Texas wins that game, they would have been the national champs. Instead, Georgia, with a 9-2 record, won. Muffed punt. They recovered it. They beat them without Herschel Walker. First year without Herschel Walker, 10-9. Texas was undefeated. It was a great game. Allowed Miami to win the national title. But, hey, what about Texas A&M? Well, even the nation wants that, All right. End of rant. Here's the deal. Like I said, if Jeremy Pruitt and people are, saying, possible coach of the year, just want to say, if he were to win it, what would it mean for Tennessee? That's 7-5 at Tennessee, and you can tell me all you want about the team that he inherited and everything like that. What did Stoops inherit at Kentucky? What did Mullen inherit in Florida? Everybody talking, well, Felipe Franks is overrated. We're going to go 9-3 with him. LSU wasn't supposed to be good this year. They're going to go 10-2. What would it mean that winning big time at those schools is not considered, 7-5, because, Pruitt's going to have to go 7-5 to win Coach of the Year. What would it mean for that? Oh, yes, 7-5 at Tennessee. That's better than going 9-3 in Kentucky or 10-2 at LSU or 9-3 at Florida. That's when you start saying, well, Bruce Pearl has the balls number 5. Maybe we ought to consider ourselves a basketball school now. I don't think we get that level is what it is, but you got to consider that. So, say what you will about Jeremy Pruitt, but I really don't think that he should be in line for Coach of the Year, even though I will be surprised if the Vols make a bowl game, considering what I thought they probably would be this year. Thought about 6-6 would be about the best. That sort of thing. But I'm really surprised you would be that good. And really the coach of the year this year, SEC, it's Nick Saban. But it shows you the flaw of coach of the year. And I talked about this when I was mentioning with Ken Hendricks yesterday about Brian Snitker winning manager of the year in the National League. You know what coach manager of the year is? It's this. We in the media pick you low, you finish high. We're trying to save face. That's all it is. Also, sometimes media relations. You'll give manager of the year, coach of the year to somebody who treats the media well. You won't give it to somebody who doesn't. As a rule, that's also that's going against Jeremy Pruitt. He may never win coach of the year because he's coached dull. And it comes down to that. You know, it wasn't Coach Dull, Randy Sanders, but kind of for the wrong reasons. I'm a sports talk show host. I don't care about what publicity, even if I get it for the wrong reasons. It's about publicity in this game, you know. But no, Randy Sanders, and I would say he's the front runner for Southern Conference Coach of the Year. He's 8-2. Won the SoCon at ETSU. ETSU has never won the SoCon before. Okay, right now it's a half title. They got to beat Samford to win it outright. Fine. Get the FCS berth. You can discuss whether or not, well, if they lose that game and Wofford or Furman wins the tiebreaker, are they really the SEC chip? They tied for it. I'll just say this, ETSU standards, if you look at up at the stadium that should be named after John Robert Bell, they've got a banner, 1962. And in 1962, ETSU tied for the Ohio Valley Conference Championship that year. I would imagine that one way or the other, the worst they can do is tie for the SoCon title this year, that they would put that up, especially since ETSU has never won such a thing. Becomes a moot point if they do defeat Samford. But here's the deal with Randy Sanders. First thing that happens to him is his offensive coordinator leaves for an entry-level job at Baylor. Huh? Second thing, he gets suspended for slapping Tyree Robinson in the helmet. Third thing, he chooses the wrong quarterback. Still, he's 8-2. Long season. You can overcome this stuff, I guess. But that does kind of speak worse of the SoCon than better for ETSU, doesn't it? But somebody won those games. But let me just ask you, if Samford wins Saturday afternoon, okay, Devlin Hodges throws for this 317. He becomes the all-time leading passer in FCS, blah, blah, blah. If that happens, then what about Josh Conklin over at Wofford as Coach of the Year? Really, what about him as Coach of the Year? Because both Wofford and ETSU would be 8-3. Tennessee fans want to say, well, Jeremy Pruitt should be Coach of the Year because Tennessee beat Kentucky. Doesn't matter that there'll be, at best, 2-game gap between the two teams. That doesn't matter. Well, actually, it does. But by that logic, wouldn't then 8-3 versus 8-3 with a victory in hand and winning the SoCon outright, wouldn't that mean that Conklin, also a first-year coach like Randy Sanders, should be Coach of the Year? What am I asking? What about Clay Hendricks down at Furman? Hey, Mark, you want to get on Randy Sanders for losing his offensive coordinator, Marcus Satterfield, to Baylor? What about Connor Shaw, tight ends coach at Furman? Point taken, but you know what? That's minor compared to losing your offensive coordinator, who was once a star at ETSU, son of a prominent high school coach in Tennessee, and he's leaving for a job he always could have had, an entry-level job at Baylor? Really? 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 I'm telling you, it had something to do with calling the plays. I don't have any proof, but you do the math. Sanders wants to call the plays. Satterfield, you know that was something, You know that was something. Losing a tight ends coach, rookie coach, maybe still with a little bit of playing ambition in him. It's nothing as compared to, okay, the former coach at Tennessee Tech, the guy that brought you in 2 players who started this year, for better or worse, Logan Marchie, but nevertheless, and then you got Fort on the in the box there for ETSU. You're losing that coach to an entry-level position at Baylor, no. That does not, that's much greater than losing your tight ends coach who, hey, Steve Spurrier wants Connor Shaw to play for him on his team in the American, right? All right, Hendricks won the award last year, though. So winning 2 years in a row, yeah, it so often comes down to politics and all that. If you wanted to give Clay Hendricks, if Furman wins the FCS automatic berth, you know what happens then? I mean, they got to win against Mercer. ETSU has to lose, and they have to allow 15 points or less. They can't allow 16 points. That's the deal. So you'd be rewarding Furman for a slow start. I mean, Hendricks started 0-3 at Furman. If he can win the SoCon this year, that's impressive to me. But you are rewarding a slow start if you were to give the Coach of the Year to Hendricks. That's what you got to remember. What about over at VMI? Scott Weichenheim. He's kept the Keydets competitive, ended a 2-year losing streak. But would you really take a 1-10 coach ahead of a coach who won the first Southern Conference championship in the school's history? Really? Look, Sanders is the likely pick for SoCon Coach of the Year. And I would still say Stoops is probably the pick in the Southern Conference if he does, the Southeastern. If he doesn't win it, probably Mullins. Even with all the warts that Sanders had early on. 8-2, possibly 9-2, speaks for itself. But if he does win the SoCon Coach of the Year, it's got to prove my point. It's more about the media giving bad predictions than really his coaching job.